colleagues, members of SMP, as well as Malawi Scotland Partnership, I welcome you all to this SMP MASP hosted Faith Forum. In particular, we are here to have an in-depth discussion of the benefits of broad religion and moral education in Malawi and beyond. Our longtime friend, a member of SMP as well as MASP, Dr. Yonah Matemba, a Malawian scholar based in Scotland, who give a discussion. He has put all this in a book so that we all hear from him on what is the role of broad religion and moral education. As we are aware that in Malawi, even in many countries of the world, we have so many religious groupings. Especially the bigger ones are Muslim, Islamic, as well as Christianity. All of these, you will note that under the religious umbrella, we also have pockets of institutions. Under the Muslim umbrella, you also have pockets of religious affiliated institutions. But all of them, they are subjected to one system, almost one system of education. So our brother, Dr. Yonah Matemba, has discussed that topic in a book. Without preempting, my name is Stella Masangano. Let me hand over to the chair of this meeting, David Bond, who is going to take us through this meeting today. Thank you so much. At the end of the meeting, myself, as well as my counterpart, David Hope from Scotland Malawi Partnership, who give highlights of capturing some of the actions that SMP and MASP will take. Thank you.
Thank you for the
thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon to everyone wherever you are. Let me first introduce the co-authors of the book being launched today. Dr. Yonah Matemba is a senior lecturer in education at the University of the West of Scotland. Previously, he taught Bible knowledge in Malawi and later religious education in schools in Botswana and Scotland. He is also chairperson of the Further and Higher Education Forum of the Scotland-Malawi Partnership. Furthermore, he is a frequently published author on multiple aspects of religious education, especially in Scotland and Malawi, as well as being an internationally recognized authority in comparative studies in this subject. Now, Dr. Matemba has asked me to invite his co-author, Dr. Richardson Addai-Mununkum, to say a few words to introduce himself. So, Dr. Richardson, if you would just say who you are and greet us, we'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Connecting from Winneba in Ghana. And I'm very happy to have been invited to be part of this interesting forum. My name is Richardson Addai-Mununkum. I'm a senior lecturer in the Faculty of Educational Studies in University of Education, Winneba, and the co-author of the book, Religious Education in Malawi and Ghana, Perspectives on Religious Misrepresentation and Misclusion. It's quite exciting that myself and Dr. Matemba have not met in person before, but our ideas connect so well that through digital means, we've been able to collaborate so much, and the product of which is what we're going to talk about today. And so I was excited when the invitation came for me to join, and I am very happy to be part of the team today, and I hope that we have a very exciting discussion.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, with these backgrounds, the two doctors are particularly well qualified to write about what's happening in Malawi and in Ghana, in the very contested space in the curriculum occupied by religious education, and also to identify the challenges that need to be overcome if the subject is to be taught in such a way as to benefit every pupil in a multicultural, multi-religious society. The book being launched today shows how competition between the main stakeholders for influence and control of this part of the curriculum is often intense in countries in sub-Saharan Africa like Malawi and Ghana, where people's religion is generally vitally important for their sense of who they are. Furthermore, different stakeholders have very diverse expectations of what the subject should deliver. Government education departments, the mainstream churches who own so many of the schools, as well as members of religious groups which are regarded by others as fringe or non-normative. All these people have very different ideas about what should be taught, how it should be taught, and for what purposes. The result is often a struggle between different interested parties to have their voices heeded and their claims met. As the co-authors explain, for religious education to be effectively inclusive of different religious traditions, it's not enough for these traditions merely to have a place in the syllabi. And in Malawi, even this has not been achieved to any great extent. There are many ways in which within a syllabus, some religious traditions can be and are being presented as having less worth than others, and even in some cases being demonized. As I think will become apparent today from what Dr Matemba has to say and the discussion that will follow, underlying what gets taught in the RE classroom are much broader and more fundamental questions, such as, what is the purpose of all education in a multicultural, multi-religious society? Who should have the right to decide what is taught? What are the mechanisms by which privilege can become entrenched in an education system and beyond? And what is the cost to a society when this happens? Now, I know that Dr Matemba is particularly happy that today's forum includes educationists, politicians, administrators, and religious leaders from a variety of religious traditions who have the influence, and it is to be hoped, the will and the ability to move the debate forward if need be. Now, I know that he's hoping that the discussion that will follow his presentation will help us to do just that. Before that, though, and very briefly, by way of introduction, what he's going to say about the key concept behind his study, Dr Matemba has asked me to say just a few words about misrepresentation of religious traditions in religious education. And I know from my own experience of teaching in Scotland that this is not an issue that's confined to Malawi and Ghana. When the authors examined in the field how school teachers and students engaged with teaching and learning about religious diversity, they found that there were at least 3 ways in which religious traditions, particularly Islam and African traditional religions, were fairly regularly and systematically misrepresented and, in some cases, effectively delegitimized. One reason the authors identified for some religious traditions being misrepresented came from the syllabi themselves, which could be very selective in what aspects of different religions they chose to highlight, and even partisan in their way of doing so. Another source of misrepresentation they found was that teachers and consequently students didn't have accurate and unbiased information. And they found in practice that this led to even well-intentioned teachers inadvertently misrepresenting religious traditions. A third source of misrepresentation they found came from some teachers' feelings that to be true to their own beliefs, they should not present religious traditions other than their own in a positive light, in case, as they saw it, they would be leading their students into error. The students found that this could be especially true, the authors found that this could be especially true in schools under the proprietorship of churches, where there was often a whole school culture which promoted the beliefs and ethos of one particular denomination, often to the extent of delegitimizing the beliefs and values of those who didn't buy into those propagated by the school. These, briefly, then, are some of the issues the authors have identified which are symptomatic of all not being well in attempts to teach RE in an inclusive way. Now, I'll shortly hand over to Dr Matemba to tell us about the book and offer us the fuller picture. Following that, there'll be a time for questions to the authors. Then, after input, hopefully, from a representative of the Ministry of Education, there'll be an opportunity for us all to discuss the issues that have been raised. So, with this, over to Dr Matemba. You're muted.
Thank you so much, David, for the kind words and for those highlights of aspects of the book. Let me acknowledge right now my colleague and brother, Richardson, for coming all the way from Winneba and Ghana. It's just wonderful to see you and this project that we worked on together. And I think I must thank him also for the way in which aspects of the book came through. So thank you for your scholarship and your expertise in making sure that this book is presented the way it has been. I just want to share a few thoughts today. I think proceeding from where my brother David Bond has mentioned. Let me start here this way. The American philosopher and educator John Dewey has said the following: education is a social process. Education is growth. Education is not only a preparation for life, but also life itself. In a democratic and plural society like Malawi, what, if I may ask, is the social process and function of our education? Beside the importance of teaching what we call the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, how should our children and young people be socialized to live and thrive in a culturally diverse, religiously plural, democratic society? In Malawi, the introduction of multi-faith RE on the primary curriculum in 1994, junior secondary school in 2000-2001, and senior secondary school in 2015 is a worthwhile development. However, due to stakeholder contestation, the government resolved to introduce both the historical Bible knowledge syllabus and the multi-faith religious education syllabus to be offered simultaneously on the secondary school curriculum, and allowing schools to choose which curriculum best fits their situation and their preference. A few questions are worth noting here. One, how have faith communities engaged with the introduction of multi-faith RE as a school subject? Second question, between Bible knowledge and multi-faith RE, which program do schools prefer to teach and why? 3, how have schools and students engaged with religious otherness in multi-faith RE? These are some of the questions which our book, Religious Education in Malawi and Ghana, has attempted to address. Based on our comparative research in secondary schools in Malawi and Ghana, the book reveals that in Malawi, multi-faith RE has been largely ignored by schools in preference of Bible knowledge. In cases where other religions are included for study in multi-faith RE, how these non-normative religions are treated in texts, in textbooks, in curriculum and syllabus, and indeed in classroom discourse, what actually happens in the classroom in the teaching of multi-faith RE, reveals 2 serious problems. The first is the blatant misrepresentation of religious other, an issue we have examined in chapter 6 of the book, and which David Bond has already stated, and therefore no need for me to repeat. But the second one, and related to the first problem, is a problem of misclusion of religion in texts and classroom discourse, an issue we have carefully analyzed in chapter 7 of the book. The concept religious misclusion is one that we have coined ourselves to describe a situation where, although other religions, besides Christianity, of course, are included for study in RE, these are minoritized and are adversely misrepresented, and in some cases demonized. Given that this is a faith forum, let me return to the first and last question I posed earlier related to how faith communities, including members, and schools, including teachers and students, have engaged with religious otherness in the multi-faith RE. I will do this by reading two excerpts from the book. On page 135, we find the following quotation from a representative of the Muslim Association of Malawi. The quotation says, "The Muslim community takes offense when Christian teachers use provocative approaches about Islam or say things that are offensive to Muslims and Islam. For example, there are those teachers who use selected biblical texts to criticize Islam or say insensitive things about our prophet. Since children cannot challenge the teacher, they go to their parents and report, and then problems start." The second quotation is from a teacher, self-describing as a Christian, representing the views of his school. We find this on page 121 in the book. Here, the teacher says, "I do not accept these other religions as worth teaching in our schools, essentially because we Christians desire to convert these people to our religion. And that it defeats logic on my part to teach a religion I want children to convert from." Therefore, the book reveals that misclusion of religion in religious education occurs due to the following reasons. 1, factual inaccuracies about religions in texts and classroom discourse. 2, insufficient teacher knowledge about different religions, leading to conscious and unconscious bias. 3, interreligious and indeed intra-religious exclusions in the classroom. Next, failure to resolve value conflicts when they occur in the classroom, and teachers struggling to contain when a heated debate occurs over an issue that has to do with how others are describing a particular religion. Finally, students' mischaracterization of the religious other, leading also to bias-led misclusion. Reading on page 144 of the book, our conclusion is that with teachers' pedagogical skills updated and the material knowledge of different religions improved, multi-faith RE can perhaps begin the necessary learning process for both teachers and students towards reinforcing interreligious dialogue rather than interreligious hostility in the classroom. Within the spirit of education for citizenship, the idea of education as a social process for good, classroom discourse in multi-faith RE should give pupils a genuine say in determining not only what is learned, but also crucially, how that content is taught and debated. To deal effectively with the troubling issue of religious misrepresentation and misclusion in RE, there's need for a paradigm shift in the way the RE curriculum is conceptualized in texts and implemented in classroom practice. Thank you so much for giving me the time to share my thoughts about our book. I now welcome your responses and questions as we continue to debate what to do with multi-faith RE in Malawi. Over to you, my brother, David Bond.
Right, thank you very much for that. Very, very clear introduction to the main theme of your book, this idea of misclusion, which you say you have coined, and I think will be used very widely, so useful it is. Now, the way we've organized it is that we think that this little session should be basically 4 questions to the author or authors about facts. And if there is a representative from the ministry after that to give their point of view, then we have our discussion. So at the moment, we would welcome questions about the approach, about facts, about well, the ideas that have been put forward to us today. So I'm waiting to see hands or chat. It might, in fact, if you prefer to do it this way, you might prefer to put something in the chat and flag up what it is that you want to see. But don't let that stop you putting up your hand and asking a question. Right. I see two hands. Stella, would you start us off, please?
Thank you, David. Actually, mine is just a comment to say this is a very interesting topic that is rarely discussed, but is a less for disaster. Because in Malawi, the majority of people are Christian. There are some districts like Mangochi, Machinga, Zomba, thereabout. We have a large population of Muslims. in some instances, we hear that maybe the Muslims, maybe they were fighting against maybe a particular person, not necessarily maybe teachers, fighting because he was behaving, maybe castigating Muhammad. So I think this book is coming at the right time. We need to see how best we can bring it to the policymakers, especially in the education sector, so that they can see how they can mainstream or they can resolve these issues before maybe we have a bomb that will erupt at a certain time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. David, you had your hand up. Is it still, you still have a question?
Yeah, thanks, David. Well, first off, Dr. Matemba, congratulations on the excellent book, and thank you for your very clear summary of it. You've identified, I think, very helpfully 5 areas where you see the issue lying. And I suppose 2 parts to my question. The first is sort of backward looking. For how long do you think those 5 issues have been there in Malawi? Are these things that have grown or developed recently, or actually are very long standing? And the second part is the forward looking. You've given a couple of recommendations there. I mean, what do you think is, I know none of us have a crystal ball, but I mean, what do you think is achievable in the future, and over what kind of time scale? So how has it developed over time, and where do you see it going, and the likelihood of those being adopted, and if so, potentially how things could change and improve? Thank you.
No, thank you so much. And also in between, I'll ask my co-author also to come in. So Richardson, please feel free to come in and add to the debate. Those 2 questions, both from my sister Stella and from you, David Hopkins. Thank you so much. What Stella has said really is quite crucial. In a country where the majority of people can describe themselves to be Christian, but yet the Constitution is democratic, and the Constitution promotes plurality. The Constitution promotes diversity. The Constitution says education must cater for all. And so if you go back to the title of this forum, it's multi-faith education. It didn't even say religious education, because that's an important distinction. So it's multi-faith education. So what happens when in a school we have children who are coming from different religious backgrounds? How do we cater for them? Religious education is just one component of it, which we have looked at, but there are broader issues there also in schools. Indeed, Stella, the point you made that there's some friction sometimes that do happen. In this book, we did actually come an incident in Mangochi, actually, which you mentioned, because Mangochi is the headquarters of the Muslim community, if we could put it that way. And there we had gone to do some interviews for that eventually found itself in the book. And we found that the teacher that had agreed to speak to us was not there in the school. And I went and was speaking to the head teacher and say, where's Mr. So-and-so? And he says, oh, just to let you know, he's not here today. I said, where is he? So, oh, well, he's at the police station. So I said, oh, what's the matter? So, oh, he's at the police station because sometime last week he said something about which the children construed to be disrespectful to Islam, and the children told their parents, and the parents came for him. So he has run to the police station. So talking about a particular subject in the school that can bring those sort of tensions, religious education is one. And I think what we're attempting in this book is to highlight these problems, so that then together collectively as a nation, and even in Ghana also, our research shows similar trends, is to find out how best we can help. I mean, our sister Stella talks about policymakers, and this is precisely the point, that policymakers, people who actually frame the curriculum, are the people who must probably be engaging in this sort of research to see exactly what's in the field, and how best going forward, how best they can do things slightly differently, or at least they would have the knowledge about exactly how the situation is on the ground when it comes to the teaching of religious education, or even just a question of multi-faith education in our system. David Hopkins, for your question, I'll maybe address the last part of it. Where do we see moving forward? And I think really, I think engagement, I think honesty and engagement about what we want for our children. If we all agree that education is a process for social good, if that's what we agree, and as a nation in Malawi, we have actually agreed that, because our constitution does say that, and also against our social practices that is being encouraged. when we come to the issue of religion, for reasons of religion being a touchy and contentious subject by itself anyway, don't even let alone education. So if you combine the two, you've got a double problem. But even with that, just the idea, so we're trying is to say to policymakers, to education experts, to scholars in Malawi, and to, in fact, religious organizations as well, for the Faith Forum, who some maybe who are here, is to say, what should we do with religious education? How best can we make sure that religious education is effective in dealing with issues of citizenship? Let me just add one thing quickly. In my introductory remarks, I did mention that the government, fearing that because of this contention between whether to teach Bible knowledge or to teach multi-faith RE, the government decides that they're going to offer 2 syllabuses on the curriculum. This is actually quite an unusual situation. In my other research elsewhere, in Tanzania, in Nigeria, in Kenya, and so on and so forth, these sort of things, what I describe as particularist approach to RE, is a different term. But even within that, Malawi is unique in the sense that you have 2 separate syllabuses and allow schools to choose. So to answer that question, schools are choosing because of the historical connection with Christianity, and some of the schools are Christian anyway. The schools choose to offer Bible knowledge and simply completely ignoring multi-faith RE or teaching other religions. And when they do teach the other religions, then we have these problems of religious misrepresentation and religious misclusion that we're talking about. So David, so those are kind of the things that in Malawi, and I think an open discussion about this. Now, the first part of your question, you're asking how long has been going on. Since 1994, if I was to put exact year, because 1994, with the coming of the new political dispensation, a new political system, and a new culture of doing politics in Malawi, we resolved as a country and say we are going to respect and recognize others. So it's not only one way of looking at things, but also consider everybody else. And so if that problem, that's where it starts now, it was hoped that by that time, these issues could have been resolved. Now, I've mentioned the year 1994, that's a long time. So one would have thought that 1994 to say to even, I'm doing actually secondary research on a similar topic, but focusing on the senior secondary school in Malawi, which have a different dynamic. And then nothing has happened. And the fact that multi-faith RE is being ignored completely, not being touched at all in schools, it's one of those missing elements. And I really wished education policymakers and curriculum planners would come in and begin to look at this, and even in consultation with faith communities, and begin a new conversation and say, how best is it we're going to produce children who can see the world in that multiple way, not just only in a single kind of binary looking way. And so, yes, so this problem has been going there for quite a long time. And it's our worry as authors and researchers in this book to say, how can it be that an issue that has been going on for so long is being left just like that? And so I was hoping that today's discussion will begin to start that conversation with everybody else who might be involved with this subject.
Thank you very much. My grey hairs allow me to take things back even further. 1977 was the first time that at secondary school it was actually proposed that there should be multi-faith education. And even at that time, it was realized that it was going to be contentious. The various stakeholders, well, many of the main stakeholders were obviously not happy with it. So it's been going on for a while. So any more hands?
Yeah, David, maybe just let me chip in a little bit, picking up from where Dr. Matemba left as a possible solution. And I think that's the big difference we saw between Malawi and Ghana, where in Ghana, you don't have an option to choose RE as in a particular religion and against multi-faith RE. So for the junior high level, everybody's supposed to do it. And regardless of the school's religious ethos, everybody does that. I will say to some extent, it has been quite successful to the point where we are now thinking there's a review of the senior high curriculum. There's a thinking that we should actually extend it to the senior high level, because the benefit I see is that at least with the children that are coming up, the hostility, the antagonism that will characterize the old age people is not with them, because they have some appreciation of all the other religions, which I think is a big plus. If we are to leave this for the politicians to decide, they always choose the easy way out. It's like, okay, let all of them exist. But in reality, we know that multi-faith is way better, given, as Dr. Matemba said, giving the children more than one lens to see the world in terms of religion. It's way better than giving them just one lens to view the world. And so if we will agree and then accept that every school should do multi-faith RE, that could be one of the steps towards solving this problem. I do have to admit that it's not just the solution, and it doesn't solve all the problem, because we have it in Ghana, but even in this study, we saw that there are still issues, still knots that have to be untied, even in the Ghanaian situation. But at least there's that appreciation that the children who are learning multi-faith RE are far more accommodating, they are far more tolerant, and they have kind of a general appreciation of other religions compared to those who do not have any idea at all about any other religion. And talking about misrepresentation, those people who have no idea at all are more likely to misrepresent and misclude more than those who at least have some idea about the other religion. So for the Malawi case, I think that could be a way forward. But it might start with a dialogue like what we are doing right now, with the faith communities coming together and agreeing that this situation is not helping us, because in as much as you're protecting your faith, other people are misrepresenting it somewhere else because you have no control over that domain. And so if you could allow all the other faiths to be taught, regardless of where the school is, then you also have the advantage of protecting your faith from being misrepresented in another context. And I think once the discussions go on and the faith communities buy into it, then we could have a lot more of the faith schools learning multi-faith RE, and I think that could be a way around the situation. Thanks very much.
Over to you, David. You're muted, I think.
Sorry, I just had a 2-minute outage there, so I've missed 2 minutes of good stuff. So if somebody could catch me up. That my computer just went out and then came on again.
Right.
I told you I had these gremlins and one just hit me. So can you give me the last 2 minutes?
Okay.
Right. Okay. The question, if I may ask a question, you mentioned the problem with the teaching of Islam and how it has caused some resentment. You didn't mention anything in your talk about the importance of African traditional religions, because, as we know, they underlie many of the beliefs and values of both Christians and Muslims. And yet, it seemed from what your book said that students and teachers were ambivalent towards it. In some cases, sort of, excluding it as something from the bush, and in other feeling, well, it's part of our inheritance. Could you say a little bit about how African traditional religion fits in, and whether there is a place perhaps for Ubuntu anywhere?
Let me just start, and I'll invite my brother Richardson to come in. Yes, the way African traditional religions are treated, they are miscluded and misrepresented in the same way that other religions are treated, but also more adversely to African traditional religions. It's almost like they're dismissed completely. There's almost the dismissive kind of attitude towards them. It's almost like they've got really nothing or very little to offer to the discussion. The problem with that is not only by the influences of the foreign religion that come in, but even by the people themselves. It's almost like a failure to embrace or to look at African traditional religion as the way. But also that has to do, obviously, with issues of which we discuss later in the book, to do with colonization. So colonization, we have discussed a little bit there. It comes in there, So most of our populations, both in Malawi and Ghana, they've embraced Christianity, and for them to tell them that Christianity is a kind of a foreign idea because they've embraced it, has become part and parcel of their culture. They can't see it that way. That before Christianity came, our ancestors, this is what our beliefs were. And going back to misclusion and misrepresentation in texts, for example, when we looked at the syllabuses and the curriculum itself, you find out that even the portion that's given to African traditional religions is very minuscule. And so there's almost like a dismissive kind of element to it, but that has to do with something else that's happening within the culture, where the culture has embraced a particular religion, in most cases Christianity here, both in Ghana and Malawi largely, and of course Islam to an extent, but completely ignoring the African traditional religion. And so David Bond, the point you make about Ubuntu and so on, so these were the things we hope that once the inclusive multi-faith RE is opened up, these are the sort of questions that should be addressed. Not just only looking at my faith, as my brother Richardson said. No. Beyond that, it's about education. What should we educate our children in the schools? And what's the role of religion in educating children for citizenship, including the teaching them of African traditional religions, which are completely ignored? I would like my brother Richardson to add some thoughts in there.
I wonder if he's frozen.
I think, yes, he appears frozen. He appears frozen. Yes.
Sorry, can I ask David or Stella, do we have a representative from the Malawi Ministry of Education there? Because if so, we would very much appreciate input if that were possible.
Just jumping in from my perspective, I'm not 100% sure. I don't think we do, but after I've said a brief comment, let's give a moment's silence. Sometimes it's not always clear from the names of participants as they've joined. I just wanted to also flag that there's a question from Eve Hartswood in the chat box as well. But a moment's silence, and if you're a representative of the Government of Malawi Department of Education, please jump in now.
Yeah.
Right.
So it doesn't look as if there is at the moment, but we've had good communication with the department, and as I'll maybe say at the end, really good relationship with the Minister of Education, who I know will be very interested in this afterwards. I'll say more about that at the end, but back to you, David, and perhaps we could pick up that question from Eve Hartswood in the.
Well, I'll put that to to Yonah, yeah, or anybody who does have the inside line here. What is the aim of the Government Education Department? Does it have a policy towards this rather strange situation where you've got a compromise that doesn't really work? Yeah.
From our research, the government of Malawi, for example, has a kind of a clear policy. They're kind of neutral about this. So as a government, in terms of government, from what we investigated and put in the book, they're kind of neutral about it. But the problem is when you come people who, these stakeholders, when they come in and they're influential. For example, the Christian bloc, if we're going to call it that way, it's quite influential in Malawi because 37% of schools belong to them, under the various kind of agreements with government. So government, when it comes to this issue, they're a little bit, they tread softly on a sector that has got the power to almost remove their schools from the system if they wanted to. And so it is for that reason that every time we're trying to speak to government officials, they are coy about what to say. The reason why they're coy about it is because they don't want to upset the powerful, for example, Christian bloc. But also at the same time, there's pressure, especially in Malawi, from the Muslim community who are quite active and wanting to be included. And there was a time in 2000, for example, there was a claim, but not true, that the reason why multi-faith was coming in was because, one, we had a president who was a Muslim, who was Mluzi, and then the reason why multi-faith was coming in was to Islamize Malawi. And I mean, it came in the newspapers, it came some radio shows to say, well, you see what's happening now. Now we have a Muslim president, is now bringing multi-faith RE, but it's not true. Multi-faith is small screen for Islam. So they want to bring Islam so that they can begin to Islamize Malawi. And once you have that tag on a school subject, it becomes very difficult to move forward with it. But for me, my disappointment was the government didn't clarify it. Didn't say that's not true. This is exactly what's happening. So when we looked at the Malawi syllabus, because we were interested to find out really, is the multi-faith syllabus Islamizing Malawi? So we went to check, and this is what we found. The syllabus gives almost equal portion to Christianity, Islam, and to an extent, slightly by 1% maybe, African traditional religions. So it doesn't favor Islam at all. It tends to kind of even out the portions to be taught in this multi-faith RE that's taught especially in the junior secondary school. But that information, as important as it is not widely shared or wasn't widely shared and say, it's not true. This is the picture. This is what's happening. The government decided to keep quiet and introduce back into the syllabus Bible knowledge and ask school to choose which syllabus they want to teach. And the result is obvious. Schools will go back to teach Bible knowledge because that's what they're used to. And that's their comfort zone. But also it promotes their religion as been done since missionary times from the 1800s.
BK is also a much easier subject to teach unless they've changed the syllabus drastically from when I was chief examiner. It's a non-controversial, given what it is. I say it's pretty straightforward. But it subverts a whole lot of it leads to a whole lot of problems. Ladies, gentlemen, please. Now is your chance. You may feel this is a bit a technical discussion for experts, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to be a big thing like, what is education for? Please don't keep your ideas to yourself.
David, I think there's a question.
Sorry. Stella, thanks very much for your hand. Please say.
Thank you, David. I just want to find out, Dr. Matemba and your colleague, you've said, especially here in Malawi, you said in most of the schools, of course, they're teaching Bible knowledge. This is alluded to the fact that the schools are owned by basically Christian, they are Christian schools, or they may be Catholic, CCP, and the like. Why is it that government does not teach early in their government-owned schools? I don't know whether you tried to find out from that angle, because government, they also have their own schools that are government, especially secondary schools.
Well, one of the things that we covered in the book and we described to some extent is that even the teachers themselves, the people who are supposed to actually offer the subject in the schools, there are two problems. So one is the school itself. It has to make a choice between Bible knowledge and multi-faith RE. In most cases, schools will choose to teach Bible knowledge for the reason that David Bourne had mentioned, but also I can add to say because, well, it's my religion. So the issue of self-identifying as my religion, in one of the quotes that I gave today, was where teachers themselves, they shouldn't professionally, but they do. So they will say, well, I'm a Christian, and I want to make sure that I teach things that I feel are helpful for my faith. And so they see themselves as evangelists. And this is surprising to find, because they're supposed to be teachers, not evangelists. And this is the difference when we talk about pedagogical skills and competences of an RE teacher. We try to dissuade teachers from seeing themselves as evangelists. There's a place for it, but not in the classroom. So we talk about multi-faith education. We're not talking about converting anyone. We're talking about evangelizing anyone. And yet, Sister Stella, most of these teachers see themselves performing that function to an extent, and that causes the problem. So when it comes to the whole question of choice between Bible knowledge and multi-faith RE, it's obviously that even the teacher who is Christian or can describe themselves as Christian would want to choose to teach Bible knowledge. But there's a caveat. So at the area when multi-faith RE was introduced in secondary schools, the government did employ imams, They started in primary school and they were to extend that into junior secondary school. And this is where this rumor that the reason why Ahmad Faith Ari was coming in was to Islamize Malawi. And then it kind of injected a fear into what's called a Christian population. It wasn't true. What the Imams were doing were to offer that aspect of Islam. And we're going back to what we're trying to address in this book, the question of religious misrepresentation and misclusion. To talk about, in fact, my brother David Bond, his book on Islam in Malawi is precisely this point, to make sure that the fact that we are teaching the children are factual and correct and so on and so forth. So most of the teachers at the time didn't have that knowledge. So what the government did under Muluza at that time, post-1994, was to bring in some of these imams who had expert knowledge about Islam. So if it came to a time to teach Islam, they would be invited to come and offer that component. But for most of the school, which have got the Christian tag, or at least traditionally some of these, or regionally, historically, they're Christian-led, to see an imam come into a classroom, to an Ari classroom, most of the schools couldn't handle that. And so they started rejecting completely, totally, rejecting Ahmad Faith Ari for that reason. But they couldn't see it beyond their own fears about their own kind of religion and fearing that their religion is going to be overtaken by Islam. And of course, from Malawi, Brother David Bond will say more about this in his book. There is another context of Islam in Malawi and education. And it's not the subject of discussion now, but there's another context, a sub-context, an important one, a contentious one, a much more troubling one, going all the way since missionary times.
Thank you very much. We get a comment here from R. Travers. I don't know what the R is. Question: is a way forward to think of these things, Christianity and Islam, as Abrahamic faiths? So to make sure that there is, the two are not rivals necessarily or separate, but have this common link. Is there any way forward in this, Yonah, would you say, or
yeah.
Would you say from what you know?
Yeah, well, that issue came up, but also including Judaism, by the way, as one of the three Abrahamic religions. So yes, that issue came up. But of course, these religions are different. But our proposal, or at least the way we see it in this book, and we're trying to kind of underline this message, is that when we say opening up, and that's one of the problems of religious misrepresentation in RE, in Malawi and in Ghana. So when we're talking about inclusive multi-faith RE, opening up multi-faith RE in schools and in the curriculum, we're talking about beyond the Abrahamic religions. And at the moment in Malawi and in Ghana, the government also misrepresents actually religions in terms of policy and the curriculum design, because it only selects 3 religions: Christianity, Islam, and African tradition. The question is, in Malawi, we know, as in Ghana, we know that we have other religious traditions besides these 3 kind of selected religious traditions. The question is, what about Rastafarianism, for example? What about Buddhism, for example? We know in Malawi we've got many Sikhs. We know in Malawi we've got many Hindus. We know in Malawi we've got people belong to Buddhism. We know this. There might not be in large numbers, but we know those small communities do exist. The question is, how does the curriculum, which tries to address democratic ideals, which every Malawian is happy to embrace, now how does that extend to what happens in the classroom and how we see religious diversity in the classroom? Surely, religious diversity cannot be seen in what's called selected tradition, where you only select 3 religions that you prefer for whatever reason, maybe a political one could be, and then leaving out everybody else. So we're looking at a broader and more inclusive approach to multi-faith RE.
Thank you very much. There's a comment from Hendrickson Kata. He would be very interested to learn from Ghana how that country is handling the multi-faith in their schools to prevent the sort of problems that we've been talking about in the Malawian situation. Yeah. So, Richardson, have you anything you can help us with here?
Richardson's sim is not, I think has disappeared, I think. Because he did mention that at some point he had some meetings, so he might pop in and out. I think more broadly, I think the situation in Ghana and Malawi is comparative. And I think one of the, and I think my brother David Bond, you did mention that some of the areas of my own scholarship and so on and so forth is comparative education. So this book is part of our contribution to comparative education. So we took a comparative approach by looking at the situation in Malawi and Ghana. And the situation in Ghana and Malawi are quite similar in their history, similar in the curriculum making, similar even including of the selected tradition of choosing 3 religions, and the same 3 religions, Islam, Christianity, African traditional religion, and the whole works. What is slightly different in Ghana from what my brother Richardson has said, and we've captured slightly in the book, is that in Ghana, at least, they only have one multi-faith religious education. They don't have 2 like in Malawi, where you have Bible knowledge and the multi-faith area and asking schools to choose. But in Ghana, they only have one, and there's a compulsory element to it in Ghana, where all schools must do it to try and achieve these so democratic ideals that we're talking about, in awareness, giving children an awareness about the religious otherness and so on and so forth, and it will become, to become more kind of attuned to the reality of the world out there. So in Ghana, in that sense, we could learn something from Ghana. At an elementary stage, obviously, we can learn something from Ghana of what's happening in Ghana. But in Malawi at the moment, we're still stuck with two syllabi a system where you have Bible knowledge and you have multi-faith RE, and then you're asking schools to choose, and schools preferring to teach Bible knowledge anyway because it's easier to teach, the notes are already there, but also because I'm a Christian, why should I teach another religion? So I think maybe Ghana, in terms of these comparative cases, we could look at Ghana and see, the good things that are happening in Ghana in terms of where they're trying to move forward. The problems are still there in Ghana. Religious misrepresentation in text is still there, and the curriculum is still there. All these problems are still there. But at least in terms of some of these issues, in terms of future direction, Ghana is beginning to go through there. There's another element I want to mention. In Malawi, as in Ghana, most of the discussion are happening in the junior secondary school. But in Malawi in 2015 and now in Ghana, they've just they're thinking of introducing similar things in the senior secondary school phase. In the Malawi one, it's not part of this book as such, but it's some of the research that I'm conducting at the moment. In Malawi, a similar scenario is playing itself out in the senior secondary school of what has happened, what we've already captured in this book. And that's our worry, that's our fear. And we hope that educational technocrats, curriculum makers, policy makers would see this research, or at least use some of this research to inform them on how best can move forward to make sure that education is democratic, not just in its intention, but in its outcomes.
Thank you very much. To bring it closer to home for some of us, could you say anything about the parallels that you've seen between the situation in Malawi and Ghana and in Scotland, especially historically? And have we don't usually try and do it, but have we anything that we can learn from what's happening in Malawi and in Ghana?
Yeah, and I think the book, one of the reviewers of the book at least did mention that the outcome, although the context is Malawi and Ghana, but the issues that it's talking about are kind of universal and do touch on the problems of multi-faith religious education across the world, including in Scotland. And as David Bond knows, I teach in Scotland, I teach religious education in Scotland, and I publish in this area too. And part of my PhD was also part of exactly what has been happening in Scotland. So I'm aware of that from a research point of view. And Scotland is struggling with the same. And Scotland is slightly different because secularism is quite rampant in that sense. So the attention to religion is not as strong as it will be in Malawi and in Ghana, where religious kind of affiliation and people ascribing themselves to a particular religion is quite high. But even with that, when it comes to religious education, you still have historical elements and residues, if you like, of resistance in Scotland, whereby there are particular religious communities who, as some of you might know here in Scotland, you've got the Catholic and you've got Presbyterians as well. It's almost like a battle all the way from David Bond, all the way from 1870, 1872. There is battle for religious education. What do we do with religious education? And David Bond, you might know, this battle hasn't yet ended. While people are no longer talking about it as vigorous as they were 40, 50 years ago, but the issues still remain as an undercurrent in how religious education is offered and taught, even in Scottish schools, even in teacher education where I am based at the moment.
Now, we may have Richardson back.
Yes.
Said his internet had been disturbed. The question for you, Richardson, from Mr.
Yes.
Nkata was, he'd be interested to learn from Ghana how the country is handling the multi-faith situation in their schools. It's different from that in Malawi. Can you give us any hope for, or a way forward that Malawi might learn from the Ghana situation, or is it so different that that's not going to happen?
Yeah. So earlier I suggested the going purely multi-faith way instead of allowing students to choose, as Dr. Matemba suggested earlier. I think another big thing is about the teachers that we are letting in the classroom and who is actually qualified to teach religion in the schools. I think we can begin from the training of the teachers and get teachers who actually teach religion, not because they belong to a particular faith, but teach religion for the benefits that we so want to derive from it. That has been a challenge for Ghana in our situation. We also had similar challenges with people who I would say do not qualify to teaching the subject in the schools. But we've made some progress in that front, and we are now doing a lot more. We're investing more in the teacher preparatory programs to ensure that people are beginning to specialize in the teaching of multi-faith RE, so that once they get to the classroom, they actually know what to do. They know all that they are supposed to expect. They know the contentions of the subject, and they know that it's not going to be an easy role. So they go into the classroom prepared with all the possibilities of what if it goes this way or that way. That in that way, you at least solve the problem some way, somehow, with the teacher being very comfortable with the subject and doing the professional job in the classroom instead of another teacher who is just there for the proselytization agenda. Then the schools, I think the faith organizations sponsoring schools might have to back down a little bit on their expectations, because at this point, even in Ghana, they think they own the schools, and so they expect that their religious ethos should be the dominating character of the school. If we are going to go multi-faith, then you have to make some compromises, some here and there, and the faith groups will have to admit that we have to make those compromises, and that will only happen when there's some form of dialogue, opportunities created for them to discuss and see that if nobody wins, if we all try to be the winner, we just have to come to the table, talk, and see where we can give concessions here and there, and then move forward with multi-faith RE in our schools. I think offhand, these are the ones that I can readily share. But before then, there was a question about the student ambivalence, and I was trying to share, I was thinking of a story to share where a student, as we were observing, was invited by a teacher to perform libation. That is a traditional way of praying. And the student willingly volunteered to go and do it. But when she was going, the student started ridiculing, and then she pulled back. And that is a demonstration of the ambivalence. Some way, somehow, the students believe that, yes, our roots are connected to indigenous religion. And so we admit the tenets, we believe somehow in the tenets, we think we are connected to it, but we are also Christians and we are also Muslims, and the beliefs of Christianity and Islam and the other religions stand in contrast to indigenous religion. So at some point, they want to claim some elements, some of the good things with indigenous religion, but at other times they're also drawn by the other individual faith. And that is the kind of ambivalence that we're trying to explain in the book. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, well, so far the people who favor multi-faith religion, the speakers, the chairman, and most people who have contributed seem to be more or less of one mind, but we know that this is not the situation generally, and we would very much welcome somebody who would give us, if they would like to give us a different perspective on what we've been suggesting.
Hi, I don't necessarily have a different perspective, but I just to sort of chip in, if that's possible. So you can see I'm sitting in a classroom at the moment. So and I'm sitting in a classroom at the moment. I've just dismissed a class, so I've kind of got a vested interest in this, I guess. And I think one of the things that's really interesting in terms of a Scottish perspective is obviously we teach multi-faith RE here. It's really interesting, and I don't know whether this was considered in the research, but it's really interesting to think about the student's perspective. So what we often find when we teach multi-faith religious education here, we present the students with a kind of quite a sort of disparate picture of religion. And I think it's very easy for some of our pupils to get really quite confused, a confused picture, a sort of blend of, and I don't know if you find this at all, but a sort of blend of these religions that, and they're never quite sure which is which, or it's very, very difficult to get them, it's very difficult to get them clearly defined in the pupils' minds. And so I think from my perspective, I think if Malawi goes down this multi-faith route, I think trying to overcome that problem, or at least being aware of that as an issue, I think would be a really interesting thing to think about. I don't know if that came up in the research at all.
Yeah, I mean, these are the issues that we picked up in the Malawi and in the Ghana research when it comes to, you know, how we present multi-faith RE. I mean, in Malawi, the government attempted to solve what's different from the Scottish scenario by pre-selecting 3 religions. So these are the 3 religions we're going to teach, and quite prescriptive actually in the syllabus itself. And then these are the elements that you're going to teach. Now, in the Scottish situation, curriculum for excellence and so on and so forth is quite broad, sometimes vague to an extent, leaving the teacher, you know, having this kind of the authority to decide the material content. It has its own problems, actually. So it was both plus and problems in the Scottish scenario. So the teacher is at the center of it, but we are assuming the teacher has the confidence. We are assuming the teacher has got the know-how. We are assuming the teacher is unbiased. We are assuming, you know, so there are all these, there's inherent problems with it. But once the teacher, say, for example, in Scotland, has all these right elements we require of them, and they're making the decisions, and it's a good place to be, because they can offer the children this holistic picture about religion, and trying to avoid what's called the supermarket approach that you're trying to suggest, which has been highlighted in research, not mine, other research before.
A very interesting comment from Nahid Aslam. He asks, has Western media caused the disrespect for religion per se? And Nahid, would you like to say more about that? Or would you just like?
Well, I just think that in the West, or certainly in Britain, you know, religion is not really taken serious now. There's a move away from religion, and there are more and more people that would classify themselves as not religious or humanists, or they don't believe in anything. Maybe capitalism is more their god than Muhammad or Jesus or Moses or any of these other prophets, and that's what the West is pushing, and I'm sure it will flow to the other continents as well, or if it hasn't already done so.
Yeah.
Well, we can ask Yonah, we can ask Richardson. How's it working?
No, I mean, the media influence didn't come across strongly at all in our research. In some researches, like we have done in Botswana, so not with the Richardson, with others, yes, that came in a little bit stronger. But in the Malawi context and the Ghana context, as far as we could tell, no. The 2 countries are still heavy religious, Christian in many cases, a large percentage of Christianity. Islam is also quite strong. And you know, yeah, and strong in that sense. And the children from Muslim families are, you know, are quite already formed in their kind of beliefs, you know, when they come into the school system anyway. So the issue, the influence of media in that sense, because the home environment is strongly religious in that sense. So that doesn't happen. It could maybe elements here and there, but not largely to make any significant difference in terms of how these children are socialized. So they are socialized earlier on in their religious kind of family backgrounds where they come from.
Yeah, adding a little bit of that and connecting to a question that was posed about why not stop teaching religion, both of them entirely. My answer is no, it's not possible in the Ghanaian and Malawian context, because like BT said, we are notoriously religious. So even if you legislate religion getting out, it will find itself in there. Media space, and the Western media particularly, has not had influence on religion. As Dr. Matemba rightly said, it's people still claim religion, it's so embedded in our lifestyle, even in linguistic practice, to the extent that in Ghana, if somebody says, "How are you?" and you don't say, "By God's grace," then there's a problem with that.
Yeah.
That is the expectation, that you always begin something with God. All official meetings begin with some kind of prayers. And so you can't take religion away. And Western media has not been able to influence it as far as the two countries are concerned. It's still very, very religious, and doing away with it from the curriculum might even actually be a disservice. It actually needs to get a greater emphasis in the school curriculum.
Yeah. Can I just add quickly, in Malawi, with the new 2015 curriculum in senior secondary school, the government has now decided that religious education and religious and moral education will become optional. So they're now optional. That's a new thing. They're not optional subjects. So we wait to see how schools are going to engage with this optional nature of religious education, both Bible knowledge, and whether the uptake will be as great before or be less now with this with option given to schools. But given that Malawi is over 80%, or probably 90 others can claim be Christian, you know, the verdict is out there.
Well, not to prolong, as we say in Malawi, if anybody has anything they would like to say, now's your chance to say it. Otherwise, I was just going to give the last word to Yonah before I say Chairman's closing remarks. Yonah, is there anything you feel you have left unsaid that you'd like to say?
No, thank you so much, David. No, we have said pretty much a summary of our thoughts around the things we've published in the book. I think our message is moving forward is to rethink how we engage with multi-faithry and what the purpose really is, why we are some of us campaigning for it almost, to say, let's give it a shot. At the moment in Malawi, in Ghana it's said different because everyone is doing it. So the problem, yes, but in Malawi, where almost schools are ignoring it, completely ignoring it. And I think Malawi is missing a chance by ignoring a subject that does something different for education, by recognizing others, by making sure everybody else is part and parcel of this democratic plural dispensation and understanding where everybody else is. If we can give our children that opportunity to understand others better, then we are going to make a better society. And this is the main message probably of the book. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's a very apt summary of what you've done and what we've been able to do with you. Chairman's closing remarks are going to be very short because I think we've all been here, we've all seen what's happened, we've all heard what's been said. Thank you very much indeed to the two authors, especially our guest, as it were, Richardson. We're so glad you've been able to share with us and to give us a different perspective, a very valuable perspective. And so thanking also everybody who has participated either by listening or by making a comment or asking a question. Very many thanks. I think it's been a really useful, really enjoyable 80 minutes. And with that, I hand over to the home team to give us what they have to tell us. So thank you very much, everybody.
And perhaps if I could add my thanks to David Bone for chairing so well, as well as to Yonah and Richardson. Two quotes I'm really going to take away from me. One from Yonah, that what we need is interreligious dialogue and not interreligious conflict. And one from Richardson that we need to give young people more than one lens to understand the world. And for me, that's what's really sort of underpinned this conversation and why it's so important to be able to support religious tolerance and mutual understanding as part of a plural and inclusive society, and that's as relevant in Scotland as it is in Malawi. You know, and I recognise, you know, not just religious education, but education generally, particularly education around sex education, LGBTQ matters in particularly Muslim schools in the UK. You know, it's been a really divisive and explosive issue in the last few years in the UK. So there's definitely, as David suggested, an area for mutual learning. I think this is great to sort of trial this sort of almost three-way conversation between Scotland, Malawi and Ghana and Richardson. It's been wonderful to hear the Ghanaian perspective, and I think that's been particularly enriching. I suppose for me, the thing that I can take forwards is that ongoing conversation between Scotland and Malawi. You know, a great friend of the Scotland-Malawi community, a great friend of David Bones, I'm sure Yonah's as well, is the Minister of Education, Honourable Agnes Theolonge, who I know will be very interested in this, and so I will share with her a copy of the video of today's recording, and I'm sure she'll be really interested and keen to respond. And similarly, I'll reach out to Education Scotland. We've got a meeting lined up in the next couple of weeks, and they're responsible for both supporting education in Scotland, but also you know, regulating it as well, and look to invite their input. So I think this is the beginning of a very worthwhile and very enriching conversation, and my thanks to Yonah and Richardson for writing the book and allowing us to be involved. I wonder if my counterpart in Malawi, Stella, if you would like to add any remarks or anything that you want to take forward to your side.
Yeah, thank you, David. Thank you, everyone. Actually, I find this very educative. I hope, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Actually, I find this very educative and informative. Indeed, if you give children a chance to learn both Muslim, Islamic, and as well as Christianity education, you give them a chance to decide and also to accept one another. Because if you limit them to one religious education, then you are giving them a spirit of biasness. That is the biggest message that we are taking as Malawi Scotland Partnership. We'll ensure that we have the book. I don't know, Dr. Yonah, when are you sharing the book, the final version of the research? It's a book. So give us so that we can also organize maybe smaller meetings, especially with the officials from education, so that maybe we can share the book with them, so that they can also appreciate that education, religious education, is very important to shape our children. Because as I did indicate last time, to say, especially in the Muslim dominant district, people tend to fight. They fight because they don't understand each other. They don't find it among themselves to accept one another. But if you give them the information that Muslim, Islamic religion is like this, and Christianity is like this, I'm sure our children or maybe communities can find it a balance somewhere to say, let's live with each other in harmony. So it's unfortunate that some of the teachers, they are championing their own education. Of course, that's obvious. Yeah. For example, myself, when I was born, I was introduced to Christianity, and my father on several occasions said, you know, your great grandfather was he was the first church clerk, something of Henderson Institute. So for me, it's a pride. I'm proud of that. So if you tell me that, hey, go this direction, religious education is sort of, Islamic, is sort of, I'll be like, no, the background all the way from my great grandfather was a Christian. So indeed, let's teach our children. Let's promote faith education in schools. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can I just add one thing, the chair, if you can allow me, because my sister still was asking about the book. The book is already published. It can be found online in Routledge, the publishers, but also you can find it online. Booksellers are everywhere. Yeah, and I'll just add something quickly. There's now a paper copy, which is slightly cheaper than this one that I have. This one is slightly more expensive. The hard copy is much more expensive, so over £100-something. But there's a paper book. The paper copy is about £43 or £39 or something. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yonah Matemba is a wonderful academic, but maybe not the best salesman. We had to be reminded to tell people where to get the book. Just last thing from me, Craig, if you put the poll up, a quick poll, just 2 questions. It'd be wonderful if people could take a moment to fill this in before say goodbye. And just while it's there, I've put a link in the chat box to other upcoming SMP events later on today. We're going to announce a new one, very exciting, 6th of October, 6 p.m. UK time, 7 p.m. Malawi time. The first in-person or hybrid in-person and digital meeting of the Malawi cross-party group in the last 2 years. We've got the new Minister for International Development, Neil Gray, there, but we've also got Professor Samson Kambalu and his Scottish wife, Susan, who many of you will know. His excellent statue of John Chilembwe and John Chorley will grace the 4th plinth of Trafalgar Square from the 14th of September for 2 years. So your chance to be able to ask questions of both the Minister for International Development in the Scottish Government and also Samson Kambalu and Susan Kambalu. I think that's everything from us. Wave now, if not. But thanks ever so much once again to David Bone, Yonah Matemba, and to Richardson. Have a great day, and I hope I see you in future upcoming SMP and MASP events. Bye for now.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.